Hi, it's Donna here and welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you 5 different tips and techniques on using white embossing powder. I'm using ultra thick and I'm using regular white embossing powder, as most of us do. Put all the links in the description if you are having trouble finding anything. And then to see the final of this card and the assembly, head on over to my Instagram channel, the Demo Donna. Thanks so much for watching and enjoy. Okay, so the first technique we are going to do is stamping with white embossing powder on a dark cardstock. So I went ahead and die cut out my banner where I'm going to have my stamp saying, and I used foundation die number 19 from Queen & Company, their foundation die collection, which I love, especially for layering my cards. And so I've got that cut out. I am next going to take my little static free bag. You want to avoid touching your paper as much as possible, especially if it's a hot day. These little fingers have lots of oils on them, and your embossing powder will stick to that. So I went ahead and applied some static free anti-static. I added a link to one of these in the description. It is not the same one I have. I've had this for a very long time, pulled out of the vault. Okay, I'm going to take a VersaMark ink. With any embossing, you want to use VersaMark or a pigment ink. It's an ink that stays wet longer. So if your ink pad says dye ink on it, that's going to dry right away. Okay, next I'm going to take my stamp. So I've got a clear stamp, and this is from the Heartfelt Holiday set by Queen & Company, which I will be using throughout this video. And I'm going to go ahead and ink that up. And I am going to stamp my stamp right over top there. Give it a good press. It's words. You don't want to push too hard to smudge it, to squish it down. So now I've got my Joy to the World. I am going to grab this with my reversible tweezers, and I'm going to add my embossing powder. And this is a regular opaque embossing powder, white embossing powder. So when you're shopping or looking at different embossing powders, there's ultra fine, microfine, regular, ultra thick, super thick, and there's opaque and transparent. So make sure you know what you're looking for. If you want to get a nice solid white, you definitely want a nice white opaque embossing powder. You can also use fine. I did put some links to some great embossing powders in the description as well, so check that out. Okay, so before I heat this up, I put my lid back on my ink pad. I'm going to move my loose embossing powder. Another great tip is you can take your paintbrush. If you have any obvious white embossing powder specks that you don't want there before you heat it, this is the time to do it. Not too many. We're happy. Okay, now I'm going to take my heat tool. I also attached a link to a heat tool. Mine is very old. Heat tools are much better these days. They have 2 different types of heat settings, attachments. So if you don't have one of these, you do need one of these to heat emboss. I'm going to start from the bottom, and I'm going to work my way up. And you don't have to blow dryer your heat tool. You can see your embossing powder go from a granule look to a beautiful glossy finish. And that is pretty much it. Let that cool for a few seconds before you go to attach that to your card. And that is how simple it is to heat emboss. Okay, the next technique I'm going to show you is a combination of your larger dies with open space and large background stamps. So this is a stamp I picked up from Stampendous. It's a beautiful collage stamp. Since I'm actually not stamping this on a piece of paper, I am just going to take this stamp here, scoot these guys over. I'm then going to take my VersaMark or pigment ink, and I'm going to ink up. And then I'm actually going to take my die here, and I am using, these dies are from Heartfelt Holiday from Queen & Company. This is the outline die, so that's an add-on. And then these additional pieces are actually from the kit. So I'm going to take my larger piece here and I'm going to lay it down. And since this is more of a mixed media look, I'm just using my finger tools and pushing my die. I'm using one finger to hold it in place at all times and the other one to just push it down instead of stamping on it. And then I'm going to gently lift that up. So now I have that image stamped out. I'm going to ink it up again because I'm going to do this little finer piece. There we go. If you don't want to touch the ink, you can always put another piece of paper over it. So I can take this and push that down. There we go. Again, making sure you're not rubbing because you don't want to move your little paper. Now I'm going to take my 2 poinsettias, take my white embossing powder. This again is just regular opaque white. And I am just sprinkling all over the place, making sure everything is covered up. Okay, I'm going to take my reverse tweezers again and just tap that off. Find a good spot to come in here and clip on. And then I'm just going to scoot these all over to the side before I heat set so I don't blow any of my powder away. And now I've got a really cool stamped impression on my poinsettia. Okay, for this next technique, this is absolutely one of my all-time favorites when it comes to white embossing powder techniques. For this technique, you're going to need an ultra thick or a super thick embossing powder. What I have is, again, from the vaults. So I went ahead and attached a link to something that I found similar. So you can go ahead and click that, or if you have something in your vault, go ahead and use that. The cool thing about embossing powders is obviously there's a lot of different ones out there, so you can use a super thick or an ultra thick. Mine's a little bit finer. It's not super chunky, but I've done this with both versions and I love it either way. So the technique here is I just sprinkled a little bit of the embossing powder on top, and now I'm going to be heating from the bottom. So make sure you're not coming up on your edges. Heat from the bottom and away from your fingers. And there you have it. I have a really cool textured snowy background. Another really fun technique, which is also a little bit more mixed media. And for this, you can use regular white embossing powder or you can use a ultra thick. And I am going to take my VersaMark ink pad and I am going to do an embossed border. All right, so first, pretty aggressively tap that in there. If you're using a cardstock, it'll be easier. If you're using a paper like I am, make sure you support your paper by holding it with both hands so you don't fold it like I just did. I'm going to take my embossing powder here and go along the edges. I'm going to just do this bottom edge first and then heat set it. So now you can see a nice embossed edge. It's a little bit better with a darker background. So I'm going to continue. I'm going to finish this entire piece of paper I have. Okay, another technique I'm going to show you is taking my ink pad again, and now I've already done my border. I'm kind of wiping my edges in there just lightly, and I'm going to show you what that looks like with embossing powder. And I'm going to do the super thick again, and I've got now a nice little snowy bottom, and I'm going to heat from underneath. And if you want that to be a solid white background, you can add a second layer. And again, I am going to heat from underneath. I'm going to now that that is all heated, I'm gonna come up and heat it on the top. And I'm just gonna pour a third layer of embossing powder on that little bottom section and then heat from underneath. All right, there we go. Okay, for my final trick, I am gonna show you how to add some snow flurries. It's a very simple technique. I've got this strip of navy blue cardstock, and I am going to be taking my little static free bag and just rub that over my navy blue. Then I'm actually gonna grab, this is just a paper pad, so I'm not on a really hard surface, and I'm using my Queen & Company pen, but you can use any ballpoint pen. I'm gonna take my fingernail tool and just hold that down, and I am just creating little snow flurries. So just squiggly lines, and you probably can't see them on the camera yet, but you will. So now I'm going to take my white embossing powder, and I'm trying to avoid touching my cardstock because I've got the oils on my fingers like every human being, and I don't want the embossing powder to stick to it. All right, now I'm just going to go ahead and heat set. Now this last technique is cool because you can use this to sign the back of your cards and emboss it with any embossing powder color. You can also write the recipient's name on the front of the envelope and emboss it. And there are all of the techniques we learned from using white embossing powder. And for the final photo of this card, as well as the full assembly, head on over to my Instagram account at @TheDemoDonna. Thank you guys so much for watching. I can't wait to read your comments. Have a great day. Bye-bye.